Welcome to Movie Magic. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we're reviewing Project Hail Mary in a format that is a little bit atypical for my film reviews. Normally I do these things scripted, I write out my review for Letterboxd, and then I use the script to compose my movie review. Today is a little bit different because I just don't have time to actually do that before the video comes out on just because of a lot of other stuff that I've got going on this weekend and other things that I'm spending my time on. So I will still be writing my review for Letterboxd, and if you want to follow over there, you can find the link to it in my link tree in the description below. But otherwise, I'm just going to do something a little bit more akin to what I would typically do on my main channel, reviewing Project Hail Mary. Just unscripted, you know, kind of my thoughts, basically what I liked, what I didn't like, and some other aspects as well. And this video is actually incorporating both my main channel and my second channel, because my main channel is all book-related stuff, my second channel is non-book stuff. So because this is the film adapting a book, it is going to be talking about both of them to some degree. So I just wanted to start off with this review, and bear in mind, even normally when I do this kind of thing, I normally have notes, but I haven't even composed notes for this review, so I apologize for that as well. But the main thing that I want to note about watching Project Hail Mary is that it is a very good movie and a very good adaptation of a movie, much like I thought The Martian was, and we will be talking about The Martian a little bit throughout this review for a couple of reasons. First thing that I have to shout out with regards to this film is actually the casting, because of course the casting was one of the reasons that it actually made me excited to watch this movie when it was announced, as opposed to, you know, when it was still kind of a question mark about whether it was going to be adapted or not, because Ryan Gosling is pretty much the only person who could have played Ryland Grace in a way that made him who he is without it being too much like Matt Damon's portrayal of Mark Watney. This is actually a big problem that I had with the book Project Hail Mary, not necessarily infamously, but amongst, I think, the general consensus. I think more people tend to like Project Hail Mary more than they like The Martian, and there's a couple reasons for that, but for me, I felt the opposite. I've always liked The Martian more, and a large part of that is because Ryland Grace's narration in Project Hail Mary in the book is honestly pretty... he's just Diet Mark Watney. He's basically exactly the same as Mark Watney, except like sort of PG, like trying to be PG, which makes sense considering the character is a school teacher, a middle school teacher specifically. But he doesn't fully commit to that, and in ways also, you know, in place of cursing, a lot of times in the narration will use, you know, like middle school replacements for those words. So in a way, I was just kind of bothered by the narration. He felt a little bit childish, and the tone didn't particularly work for me because he was trying to be the charismatic Mark Watney type, but he just wasn't. And so the casting for the movie actually works really well because Ryan Gosling can play that competent person with a ditzy expression type. You know, he is able to come across with the level of incompetence that Ryland Grace has, despite still being a very smart and capable person, as opposed to somebody like Mark Watney, who is inherently just straight up more competent, straight up, like no questions asked. And also is a little bit more charismatic as a result. Ryan Gosling's portrayal of Ryland Grace here allows for the type of charisma that you need for that character to be good without it coming across as cheap or, again, too similar to the prior character. This was a problem that I had with the book, and the casting in Project Hail Mary allows for this to really work out. But Ryan Gosling's casting, of course, is not the only thing about the cast that works. I mean, there's a particular character who, I mean, in the context of the movie, it's not even really spoiling anything. If we were just talking about the book, it is kind of a spoiler to say that it is a first contact story, but the trailer of Project Hail Mary spoils that aspect. So, you know, it's hard to get around the fact. Rocky's casting, as far as general tone and voice work and stuff goes, also very good. Eva Stratt's character as probably the primary side character within this movie, and sort of the book in a way, is also really good. She in particular, her dynamic with Ryan actually allows for the implicit memories and I guess the storyline, the past storyline, the amnesia side of the storyline, to actually work in a more effective way in the film. And that's the next point that I want to get into, is the general plot and the storyline, because as far as the real-time sequence is concerned, Project Hail Mary, the movie, gets it perfect, like quite frankly perfect. The only thing that I have to complain about with regard to how the general plot goes and the details of it, having read the book, is that there's a lot of things that might fly over your head, or that might be a little bit man, what would the term be? It loses a little bit of substance in the film, just because it has to gloss over so many details of things, as opposed to something like The Martian, where the video diaries and whatnot that make up a huge part of Mark Watney's side of that story, and then the Earth stuff kind of is able to use those details in ways that are effective without being too much. Project Hail Mary, I think, leans a little bit back on that and doesn't use them enough in some cases, but there's also so much to it that it would be hard to actually fit in a movie. The film is only 2.5 hours as is, and still in a couple of sequences arguably feels rushed. So that's a little bit of a concern that I have about the movie. It's not like a perfect rendition of that, but in terms of getting all the plot points in there, and it's sticking to the book, and generally just being a faithful adaptation, Project Hail Mary is a faithful adaptation, and glossing over some of the details is a nitpick at worst. So I definitely will commend the filmmakers and the writers for sticking to the book in that regard. Let's see, what was the other thing that I was thinking? Oh, the amnesia storyline. I would say that the movie is actually more effective with regards to the way that it actually utilizes the amnesia storyline, because the conceit of the book is that Ryland Grace wakes up on a ship called the Hail Mary, unable to remember who he is or why he is there, but he kind of has to figure that out. And in the book, the amnesia storyline feels a little bit forced at times, just in terms of how and when he regains the memories and what is and isn't included. One of my primary complaints about the book, outside of the Ryland Grace Mark Watney comparison, is that the amnesia storyline wasn't fully utilized to the extent that I wish it had been. I would say through the first half of the book, it's actually really good, but then the back half tries to make some scenes emotional without using enough stuff to actually let things connect properly. There are some seemingly emotional or implicitly emotional moments that occur in the amnesia storyline that just don't have the oomph that they need to, because Ryland just kind of forgets to react to them. Part of what makes the amnesia storyline effective in the book is that when he encounters these memories, he comes out of the memories in the real-time sequence and reels from them and has to react to them basically in the narration. Oh man, this just came back to my mind. That's crazy information, or that's something emotional, or whatever the case may be. But then in the back half of the book, some of those memories that should be way more emotional than even some of the ones earlier on in the book, you experience that memory for the purpose that it serves in the main plot, to give Ryland some information that he needs in order to, do the next thing. But then he stops reacting to it in the narration. The emotional effectiveness of the amnesia plotline wears out as the book goes on, and that's something that bothered me about the book. The movie does this a little bit better, first of all, because it doesn't inherently require super in-depth reactions to those memories, because the way it's able to cut back and forth between them is more done from a cinematography standpoint rather than from a plot standpoint. It obviously still matters, the timing of certain stuff, but it's a little bit more implicit, the way that Ryland reacts to stuff. You'll have a couple of broken shots that last a split second or a second a piece that basically give you the full story of how he reacts to receiving that information, and that works really well in the movie from a film standpoint. That's something that you can do there that you can't do in the book, so I think that actually works for the movie. And the other thing that I think works about the amnesia storyline is that it basically cuts out all of the characters relevant to that storyline, aside from Eva Strat specifically. I mean, there are other characters there. There's one in particular that's notable while Ryland is doing his experiments to figure out what's going on with Astrophage and how to basically work on it in the future. That there's some entertaining and funny interactions there, but for the most part, the past timeline within the movie is basically just Ryland and Eva Strat. Like I said, there are other characters there, but they're, more of an afterthought, we'll say. They don't really matter as much in the actual story, and that's okay, because they don't actually matter in the real-time story as much either. So more focus is actually given to this particular dynamic between these two characters in the movie than I feel like they had in the book, ironically enough, and that actually made that particular part of the storyline and some of the reveals that come along with it more emotional in the movie than they were in the original. So in that sense, I would say that the movie actually does something better than the book with the Amnesia storyline. It's more effective. Like I said, in the book, the back half of it kind of runs out of the emotional steam that I feel like it should have had, just because modern day Ryland doesn't really react to the information after a certain point for some reason. But in the movie, you actually get to see those reactions in real time rather than, after the fact. And after the fact, again, it's still more implicit within the writing and within the cinematography than it is within like the actual character doing or saying something like, oh, wow, that memory or whatever, because that would be silly, right? So I think that the movie does the Amnesia stuff brilliantly. But more than the Amnesia stuff, the real-time plotline is also, like I said earlier, handled really well. It is extraordinarily faithful, and part of the way that it's able to be so faithful so effectively is because of the incorporation of Rocky. Now, I do wish that Rocky was not in the trailers, and I do wish that this was a little bit more of a secret going into the movie. I get that it would have been pretty impossible to keep it a full secret, because just because of the sheer amount of people who read this book, who otherwise don't really read books, who read this book ahead of the movie. It would have been difficult to keep a secret, but I do wish it would have been kept a secret, because I think it would have been slightly more effective on the screen if we hadn't known that this was coming. Maybe that's just me speaking from the hindsight side of things, the fact that I would have known about it all along myself. So I don't know, but I would say that everything with regards to the depiction of Rocky and similar within this movie is fantastic. Like, I just don't even know how to approach covering the topic, because, I don't want to say too much. Just know that it is really, really good. The development is really good. And I think that the payoff that comes with the ending is more emotionally resonant in the movie than it is in even already in the book, despite how glossed over a lot of conversations have to be on account of runtime, right? And there's also the fact that the mathematical, the scientific side of things within the movie had to be cut back a lot, just for time's sake. So that payoff doesn't have as much going for it in the movie, technically speaking. So it kind of forced the emotional payoff to go a little bit further, if that makes sense. And overall, I think that works really, really well. I think that Project Hail Mary is a fantastic adaptation of this book. And I mean, it might arguably even be a better adaptation of the book than the Martian's adaptation is, just because there are some things about it that it gets better rather than just exactly right. But I do think that both of these books, in a lot of ways, are very comparable, and anybody who's read both of them knows that they are very comparable. And I would say that the films are very comparable in that way as well. But something that I can't really talk about with regards to the Martian's adaptation is more on the technical side, just because it's been so long since I've watched it and I wasn't really paying attention to any of the technical sides of things back then, but I would say with Project Hail Mary, there's a lot of the technical aspect that is also really, really good. Cinematography in particular, with like the space scenes, for example, those shots are all really cool. There's a lot of really interesting dynamic angles of shots that occur with regards to like, you know, circling around and stuff in a hole where gravity is concerned. Even some of the flashback shots are framed in such a way that you think they're in the current timeline for a few seconds until another character pops up and it's like, oh, so this is in the past, and then the camera will like readjust. And there's a lot of really interesting shot decisions between cutting between the two different timelines, I guess you could say. That is really interesting. The score in Project Hail Mary is also really good. I would say that the original score moments, particularly in the first act, are just like some of the best movie score I've heard. I don't know how much that is going to resonate with anybody else, but for myself, I tend to either not really notice score that much, or if I do, sometimes it's a bad thing because it's like kind of overshadowing everything else. But I would say that the tone of the score is very, very complementary to the movie. It doesn't necessarily forsake any of the seriousness of the plot, because the plot is in a lot of ways very serious, but it does have a little bit of that I don't really know how to describe it. I don't want to say juvenile tone, but there's a little bit of that juvenile tone that Ryland Grace's character has that it just kind of complements, like I said. So there's all of that, I guess. So, you know, even from a technical perspective, Project Hail Mary was really enjoyable to watch. And just as kind of a little personal note at the end here, I would say that Project Hail Mary is one of the first movies that I've watched in a long time that has allowed me to like actually get lost in the movie, rather than my perspective, you know, watching it, analyzing it, for example. Because I do look at all the media that I consume, books, movies, games, whatever, and I do view them from a fairly analytical angle, and I do get lost in that content sometimes. I do get, you know, lost in the story at plenty of times. I'm not saying that that never happens, but with movies in particular, I find myself getting distracted, or it's a little bit harder to get lost in them than it is other types of media for me, for whatever reason. That's more of a recent development. Again, reasons that I don't particularly know, but Project Hail Mary was genuinely able to distract me, and I like forgot that I was in the theater. I forgot that I was like in the real world. I was just experiencing this movie for probably solid 2/3 of the movie. I just completely forgot where I was, and that's probably the first time that that's happened while watching a movie in a very, very long time, actually. Normally, I'm very keenly aware of what's going on around me, even when I am experiencing other stuff. But no, Project Hail Mary, I just lost myself in it. So that is another thing that I can say for it. I don't know. I was originally going to include like a section in this video that like discussed the comparisons between The Martian and Project Hail Mary a little bit more in depth, but I think I'm going to go ahead and cut the video here because I haven't read The Martian in probably somewhere around 8 years, give or take, and it's probably been a pretty similar amount of time since I've watched the movie. In fact, it's probably been longer since I've watched the full movie than when I last read the book. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's been several years, so it's hard for me to make active comparisons. I think it would be unfair for me to do so. That might be something that I do at some point in the future, however, because I do want to reread The Martian now that it has been several years, and I love this book. I've read it multiple times already, so I know how much I love it, and that's how I know that I still like it more than Project Hail Mary. But I should go ahead and rewatch that movie as well. I would like to do that, so maybe at some point on the channel here, the second channel linked with the main channel, I'll do like a dual review of both that book and the movie, kind of like this at some point in the future. But with all that being said, thank you for watching this review. I hope that my rambling thoughts and my impressions of the movie were useful or interesting. I think this movie is fantastic. I'm not 100% sure what I would rate Project Hail Mary. Probably 4.5 out of 5, with that half-star dock largely being on account of some of the stuff that had to be glossed over, the lack of inherent oomph that comes from the movie just on account of some of the stuff that it had to skip over. mathematically, scientifically, some things that I think are going to be less easy to understand if you're only watching the movie and you miss the book. Because a lot of it, if you've read the book, you have enough of the background that like it still makes sense, or you're reminded of things that you otherwise might have forgotten. If you're only watching the movie, some things might be like, wait, why does this make sense? And you're not entirely sure or whatever. But yeah, so I would probably say 4.5 out of 5. It is very nearly a perfect movie. It was a really, really good time. So that will be the end of my review. Thank you for watching if you did. I hope you had a good time. And if you're debating whether or not you should go watch it, I think that you should go watch it, even if you're somebody who doesn't like the book, because I do know a handful of people who really don't like the book for some reason. I think that the story works better on screen, particularly because of Ryan Gosling's performance. So I would encourage you to go see it either way. Thank you for watching one final time. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.